This painting shows a cemetery next to the ocean during a storm. On one side you have the cemetery with the tall grass and the grave markers. It almost looks like it's been neglected for a while. The wreaths around the headstones are very dry and old, and the path is quite overgrown. You can also see that some of the headstones are tilted, and in the background that the grass is very tall. On the other side of the cemetery, you have the violent sea that's very much alive and tumultuous. You see the sea spray crashing on the rocks and even coming into the cemetery. There's a deep contrast between the colors as well, between the dark greens and the light blues. On the one side, you have the dark green of the grass, the trees, and on the other side, the variation between the clouds and the sea. It contrasts quite nicely. Both sides are separated by a wall in the middle, which seems to almost be being overcome as the storm grows stronger. You can really see the movement in everything, in the wind in the trees and in the sea spray. It seems in a way that this painting is trying to highlight the separation between life and death, the juxtaposition of the deserted cemetery and the tumultuous storm and ocean show the contrast between the two. It also, in a way, shows the blurring of the lines of life and death, as a cemetery that is a place of death is still experiencing the violentness of the storm. Even after death, nature still persists in a way and is still affecting life. It's full of deep, tumultuous emotions and contrasts which really draw the viewer in. Even though the image is dark, in a way it's not depressing at all. It's more like beautiful. The feeling of the work is really developed through the colors. The colors are deep and rich, and the contrast between them really sets off everything nicely. You have the dark of the trees with the greens and everything, very dark and deep. And then on the other side, you've got the light gray blue of the sea and sky, and really the variation in the clouds and between the trees really shows the deep contrast between it. Also, everything is in a state of motion in this picture. You can see the trees moving in the wind and how the violent storm is really affecting everything. It's blowing. The cemetery, which is usually stagnant, is full of life in this work. And it really shows the contrast between the two, how even as this town cemetery is a place of rest and death, nature is still affecting it. This work is really kind of where it's placed in the room. It's a centerpiece. It's full of, the room is full of transitional art that was done in the late 1800s and early 1900s, which was really a time of transition in art and deep emotional conveyance. It's really a piece that captivates you when you walk into the room. It draws the viewer into this desolate yet beautiful landscape and leaves the viewer with a sense of life, even though it's very dark. And looking at this work really made me think about life and death, which is something that you don't often do. It's strange how the painting is so dark, yet the feeling you get from it is not. It's not one of hopelessness or despair. It's one of like great beauty and appreciation almost. Analyzing and interpreting the artwork it's not something I do a lot, so it was an interesting experience to really sit down and examine it and derive a deep emotional meaning from it. It really opened my eyes as to how much emotion and depth can be found in a painting, especially one like this, which really, it has no figures in it. It's all just landscapes and nature. And the museum's interpretation of the painting is it shows a relationship between nature and mankind. The painting dramatizes the insignificance of human life and death in the face of nature's raw power. My interpretation in the museums are similar. We both talk about the contrast between life and death and kind of how nature kind of overwhelms all of that. And then my interpretation was a little more positive, but they were generally very similar. I feel good about my interpretation, how it compares to the museums. The information provided by the museum supported my interpretations and really kind of rounded it all out with giving the historical background of the time period and all the emotions conveyed through it. I really liked experiencing the process of interpreting the artwork and delving deeper than just the surface level of it being a pretty painting, how it's beautiful to look at and you're instantly captivated. When you stand there and look at it for a longer period of time, you really develop a deeper sense and meaning of understanding.